Hello class, I hope you're doing well today. We are going to talk about how to do the assessment on intersectionality. So as we mentioned before, intersectionality is the current most comprehensive theory about race, class, gender, sexuality. Physical ability, it includes macro-level social structures, things like policing, law, history of law, history of policies, all of those types of things. Micro-level interaction perspectives, things like culture, socialization, norms, values, mores. We learned about a lot of these in the first chapters of the book. But you need to take into account that all of these different components, the macro and micro level components, the statistical categories that you would assign people into, like class, gender, and sexuality, that's only part of the situation. The other part of it is that we have ideologies in our society that are constantly changing. And these impact people differently based on geographic location, the time and place that they're born, whether they're male or female, what their sexuality is and their physical ability and this type of thing. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how to use a theory like this one in order to do an analysis or an assessment on some type of contextual situation. So what you want to do is to start by looking at the different components of the theory itself. And you want to break it down into manageable parts. So how do we break it down into manageable parts? Well, the first thing that we need to do is look at the different parts. So it says the current most comprehensive theory about race, class, gender, sexuality, and physical ability. So this theory that includes this is definitely one part, right? We also need to look at the macro level social structure. So this is the second part. Going along the same theme, we need to look at the micro level social structures. So then this would be the third part. And then we also need to look at if it's an evolving state, so constantly changing, and that ideologies influence people and are greatly influenced by people. So you see we have at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different components that we're going to have to use. And you're going to use each one of these separately to analyze a particular story that we will be looking at a contextual case. So I've broken it down for you. You can see here that it is the theory about race, class, gender, sexuality, and physical ability. There's macro level social structures. There's micro level interaction perspectives. Society is always in an evolving state, so we always see change. And then human perspectives are influenced by ideologies and also influence ideologies. So what do we need to do? Well, what we're actually going to do is, let's go back. Maybe not. Go back up. There we go. In this assignment, you're going to be breaking down this theory into different parts, and you're going to be using it to analyze Trina's story. That's the title of the video that you're going to be using, and you can find that on YouTube, like every other thing that I use in the class. So you want to start by, breaking this down into its components, reviewing some of these questions that I'm giving you to guide you through it. Watch the video, then go back again and answer the questions, and then go back again and watch the video again. So this takes a little bit of time and practice. Analyzing is something that you often don't practice in academia, in school. If you're younger, you haven't practiced this very often in K through 12. If you're older, you may have practiced this before, so it may come a little bit easier for you. So talking about race, class, gender, sexuality, and physical ability, you would want to describe Trina's race, her class, her gender, and her sexuality. And then talk about how does her race impact how she is treated in the legal system. Let me break this down into another one. There we go. Then talk about how her class impedes her access to health care. How does society place responsibility different on her because of her sex and sexuality? And how does her physical ability, in this case a drug addiction, impede her access to other types of resources like health care, the legal system, assistance in parenting, and that type of thing. Then we would move on to the macro level social structures. So how do macro level social structures like history, law, and bureaucracy impact Trina and her baby? And how is the historical racism, in other words, Jim Crow racism that you learned about in the lecture, connected to the current legal policies? That should be its own question. How are the laws related to Trina's story? How are the laws related to Trina's situation impacting her ability to 1, access drug treatment, 2, access health care for her child, 3, impact her ability to mother? How are people of color most policed? And how are white and wealthy communities most often policed? Policing is a macro level interaction between the communities and police. So what's the policing orientation when you look at how wealthy white communities are policed in contrast to how poor black communities are policed? This would be a general assessment. And so you need to talk about these on a macro level. Then we're going to move on to the micro level interaction. So micro level interaction perspective includes things like socialization, culture, norms, and values. So how do these micro level perspectives impact Trina's ability to mother? So some of the questions or the questions that you need to make sure you answer are, what do you think are the predominant values and mores of Trina's community? How has the pervasive religious culture in her community impacted the way her situation has been interpreted? Is this an attempt at socialization? Why or why not? Talking about how they're constructing Trina and the laws and policies regarding to Trina's situation and other women like her. Is this an attempt at socialization? If you think it is, why is it? Or how? And if it's not, why is it not? Or how is it not? In terms of ideologies and changing ideologies, you can look at this from a perspective of how would Trina's situation change if she were white and wealthy? How would her situation change if she were black, poor, but male? Taking into consideration everything else is the same. And how would it change if she was in California? How would her situation change if she was going through the same situation 75 years ago? So this should help you look at the ideologies concerning black mothers, black poor mothers, black fathers, white mothers, wealthy white mothers, how we perceive the situation in California versus in North Carolina or South Carolina, North Carolina, where this is, and how would the situation be perceived differently 75 years ago in contrast to today? Then the part that you probably didn't think about, and that's most important in that it actually brings the theory of intersectionality together, and that is the actual concept of intersectionality. The point of intersectionality is that all of these things intersect to create specific situations and contexts. So how does all of this intersect to create her situational context? So you need to talk about how all of the different components that we've discussed, changing ideologies, macro and micro, race, class, and gender, all intersect to create a specific situational context for Trina and people like Trina. This is in the video only. When you look at the instructions, it is not included there. So you need to look at just the questions here. Follow this guideline very clearly. Identify, please use your standard format. Make sure you have subsections. I've labeled your subsections for you here. This is your first subsection, your second subsection, your third, your fourth, and your fifth. You need a minimum, not maximum, of at least one paragraph to describe each one of these different subsections in order to get a minimally decent grade to show you've completed the effort required for this assignment. This is a 20-point assignment. It's worth more than your other discussion assignments. It is posted under Blackboard assessments as opposed to the discussion assessments, so you won't be discussing or looking at anyone else's. This is a paper, essentially, an analysis paper. So I know this is challenging for many students. Please follow the guidelines as strictly as possible. Do the best you can in analyzing. It's very important that you're not giving me your opinion, but an analysis, and there's a very big difference. You may have different opinions, you may have a different religious view or political view than what you think these questions are aiming to pull from you. That's not the point. It's not about what you think or how you feel. The point is an actual unbiased analysis. So the goal is to be as unbiased culturally, ethnically, politically as possible when you do an analysis, regardless of or not of whether you agree with the specific situation of the story. So go ahead and watch the video, answer the questions, and have a great weekend.